Take a look at this picture. So this is an episode of Vlogging with Tempo. I'm your host, Joey Brown. I'm the general manager of our service group at Tempo Air. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about the history of Tempo. And I've got one of the best people to talk about that with me, our good friend, David Gannon. Well, welcome, David. It's a pleasure to have you here on Vlogging with Tempo. And like I said, it's no better person to have to talk about the history of Tempo than a founding member or a founding partner with the company, as well as our current chairman of the board. So thank you for being here.
Well, delighted to be here. It's early for a retired person, but I don't mind being. It's always fun to be here at Tempo.
Well, man, I really appreciate it. Some of what we'd love to talk about, really just from your perspective, since you have all this understanding, is the start of Tempo, what it means to be a Tempo partner, and kind of how this all evolved.
Well, it's actually a pretty interesting story as to how we got started. Back in 1997, we were a division of TD Industries, which was a very large, long-term mechanical contractor here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. They've been around since 1946. So in 97, they were chiefly, almost entirely, a commercial firm. And they made a strategic decision, and it made sense when you look back, that it did not make sense for them to have a residential component where they were dealing with retail customers. They really wanted to be a B2B organization, not a B2C organization. So it was decided that they would spin us off. At the time, the deal was made, and for good reasons. It was held pretty tightly. In the fall of '97, they made a deal with ARS, which was a group of investors that were rolling up air conditioning companies into a large organization, and they made a deal with them to spin us off to them. We would go kind of as a whole unit, but it didn't come to fruition, and I think that's a very good thing. We really weren't a good fit for that kind of organization. That kind of organization was mostly service companies. We were largely a new construction company devoted to putting new systems in new homes. And we weren't really allowed to have a service group that could service existing customers because TD Industries had a service group and we couldn't compete with them.
Right.
So it really made sense for us to go off on our own and have our own overhead, which would be lower, and establish a business that way. So the deal with ARS looked good. It was going to be part of a stock swap, and their stock was doing well. It was, I think, $25, $28 a share, going to go to $100 in the next couple of years. By the time it came to sign the deal, their stock had dropped to about $8 a share, and it made no sense at all to go through with that deal. It wasn't going to be good for TD Industries. Probably wasn't going to be good for ARS either. So it's still the strategic decision to spin off the division still remains. So we made the decision. Well, we'll just form our own company, and weren't sure exactly how that was going to be, but it was a real quick effort. We were informed, I think, in late October, or we weren't informed in late October. We were actually informed. We were informed in late October. I'll take that back. But our edict was to be out of the building where we were by Thanksgiving.
Oh, wow.
We had about 30 days
Okay.
to get out there on our own. Now, TD was going to support us. We hadn't completely financially separated from TD, but operationally we separated from them in 30 days.
Oh, wow.
We found a location up on Century Drive in Carrollton, which is just north of Beltline, just west of I-35. It's a small space, about 9,000 square feet, that we moved into on a 3-year lease. We had to find a controller because we did not have our own financial department. We didn't have accounting. We had to find a controller, we had to find software, we had to get the employees over, we had to have some sort of HR. So it was a real challenge, but we were able to do that. Now, we were a pretty small company at that point. I think our annual revenues were about $8 million, and it was all residential new construction. But we really felt like it was going to be a real opportunity because we felt, well, there's a lot of potential in the service industry. We had people within our industry, in our company, that had a service background, that knew how to do service. So we really look forward to having our own service company and building the business that way. So we moved out, we made it. We moved out over Thanksgiving in 1997.
I can only imagine how difficult that decision was. And when I say that, moving from a kind of an ownership or an employee ownership company at TD, and then moving and starting the same type of deal or something very similar at Tempo, although it sounds pretty easy to do, but what you kind of explained, it's quite a big process to kind of get that off the ground. And then more so, not only to move the company, start up a service division, and that in itself, although we have the talent, probably still pretty tricky, getting off the ground. And so really what I'd like you to tell me next, if you could, is a little bit about the ESOP model, what employee stock ownership plan is to Tempo, and really how that drives the culture of our business.
Well, that's a little bit of a complicated story, but it's a good story as well. So when we left, TD remained financially responsible for us until we actually completed the sale of the company. And they supported us where we needed it, but we essentially were on our own. We didn't have any real backup financially other than TD Industries. So we took out a loan from TD Industries, and it was a loan, I think it had a 30-month payback on it. We paid it back in 11 months, which we were very proud of. But the industry was very busy at that time. So initially, the new corporation, which was called Tempo Mechanical Services, Inc. at that time, initially, it was literally sitting in the conference room, and 7 of us threw $1 on the table, and that's what we paid for TD Industries. Now we signed a note too. That's what we paid. That was the initial capitalization of TD Industries. So we went there. The fortunate thing about that is in the residential new construction business at that time, the model was such that you generally got paid for your work in less than 30 days or less. So working capital was going to be tight, but it was there. As long as we stayed on top of collections, we had working capital to do it. But when we bought the company for $7, we made a commitment, a verbal commitment, that we would sell it to the employees.
Okay.
But forming an ESOP, which is a model we took from TD Industries, they were an ESOP. Forming an ESOP is not a simple process. Yeah. But we engaged a ESOP attorney. It was Linda Wilkins, who had done TDs at ESOP, but Linda Wilkins was with Locke Lord, which is a large law firm, and they wrote an ESOP plan for us, and they did what we called a private offering memorandum. And what this did, it allowed the employees we took about 30 employees from TD Industries that were involved in our section of the business, and also the few employees they had that were doing residential service to support our business. We asked them to come over, and if they wanted to, we said, you can bring your ESOP funds that you have in the TD Industries ESOP and roll them over into the Tempo Mechanical Services ESOP through this private offering. And then what we could do is we could then use that capital as working capital. And we raised a little over $1 million. Right. But we got that all done. That was we had incorporated in July of that, but we didn't get the ESOP in place until I think late September of '98.
Right.
So September '98, we officially became an ESOP. We also, at that point, allowed some outside investment. So there were 7 of us, I believe, that actually put some outside capital into it. We raised a couple $100,000 with outside capital. And those people remained, that money remained in the company until about 2020 when we bought all the outside shares out and Tempo became an ESOP, 100% owned. The company was 100% owned by the ESOP in 2020.
Wow. So in '98, if that was the really start of something new or kind of what we are now, or similar to what we are now, how many employees did we have at the start of Tempo Mechanical Services?
Employees, actually, we had about 30 people that we brought over. We didn't actually hire that many people that weren't previously with TD Industries. So we brought over about 30. We did hire Peggy Scribner. She came over, she had just started. I think Steve Jacobson was in that group. They had just started with TD Industries and came over like a week after. But we all didn't hire that many. We hired a new controller, Ken Cavanaugh, came in and he was our controller. I had known him from my previous air conditioning experience with Dring Engineering. He was controller there, so he put it together for us and knew he was a very capable person. So we probably had 35 employees, maybe 40 by September. The summer of '98 was a tremendously hot and a tremendously busy summer. So as our model is, we used a lot of independent contractors, almost exclusively independent contractors, to do our installations. And we had a mixture of independent contractors doing our trim phase of it, and we had some in-house people doing trim phase of it.
Yeah, I remember, so when I hired on '98, it was July 6th of '98, so I was one of the lucky ones that did get hired in the first round of hirings after we started the company.
You were hired 5 days after?
5 days after. 5 days after, so, but still very excited. But I remember the amount of work that everyone was doing, and it seemed like, there was almost never enough time every day, and I think there still is that same understanding, or at least belief for me, that if we can find a way to add more time in this day, we can get more work done. But '98, no doubt, was a very difficult, hot summer, and we've had lots of them through the years here. And I know that that's traditionally the busiest time for our service division, but really for our construction division and our and we should talk a little bit about US-EcoLogic as well, or before it kind of exclusively turned that Tex Energy Solutions. But really, those businesses are somewhat consistent. At least they have less peaks and valleys than our service division does, because we can see where the summer drives a lot of demand for our service group. But talk a little bit, if you would, about kind of how US-EcoLogic or Tex Energy Solutions was kind of brought in, and how we created that.
Well, Tex Energy Solutions was really a product of the building codes. What had happened is Tempo had kind of been known within our industry, the residential new construction industry, as sort of a leader on the engineering side of it. So when the 2001 and then 2003 and 6 codes, building codes and energy codes, started to take effect, our clients really came to us and said, how do we comply with this? How do we do this? So we quickly trained up several people. We sent them to a place in Atlanta. I'm trying to think of the name of it, and you could take a course in residence there that taught you these energy codes, taught you how to comply with them, how to test them.
Was it Comfort Solutions?
Southface.
Okay.
Southface Institute out in Atlanta. That was the name. I couldn't think of it there. We went to Southface. Several of us went there, and we ended up with 4, 5, 6 energy qualified people in a hurry.
Right.
And then we started to train our own people as we did that and could get them certified. So what it amounted to is that it looked like somebody was going to have to do that. There were some big national companies that were trying to do it. They weren't doing it very well. And it's really Steve Saunders' baby that he really saw a pony in there.
Right.
He said, there's a business opportunity in there. So our first attempt was really to become what they call a provider. And that we made application for. We really didn't fit that. So we kind of scaled that back. So we need to be people doing the field work, and going out there and inspecting and testing. So we became raters, and that was a form of Tex Energy Solutions Incorporated, which was everybody known as Tex Energy.
Yeah.
Nobody uses Solutions Incorporated.
Yeah.
And we served our builders. We actually did energy audits for existing residents. Those energy audits were supported, and there were a lot of funding available through the local utilities to increase energy efficiency. And we were able to do really thorough audits and show people how they could not only fix their air conditioning system, there's a lot more to it than air conditioning, but how they could fix their house where it could become more energy efficient.
Yeah, 100%. The audit business is something that I hold very near and dear to my heart. As I've grown up at Tempo, some of what the work we did, my favorite work we did was the audit work. Because you really got to get into the bones of that structure, and I only saw that in new construction. So I kind of took everything I knew and remembered, doing installations as well as service and warranty work for our construction group, and then put it into the existing home, and watching those homes perform with the newer technology equipment, the better insulation, the better sealing, and really trying to take an existing home and putting it to a standard of measure of a new construction home. Very difficult to do, but can be done, and when done well, the customer sees the benefit of that. So loved getting to see that. The funny thing that I do remember about a few stories that I heard from you and Steve over the years was, the dynamic of having two businesses that are essentially, one is checking the other, or not just the other, but really working, they're both working for the builder, and trying to make sure that builder, their needs are met, their homeowner needs are met. So having to work the dynamic of really checking your own work, seems difficult to do, and from the outside it may seem a little weird. How are they doing that? But tell me a little bit about what kind of what the standard was for Tempo and why that works so well for our customers.
Yeah, you could make a case for a conflict of interest there, and it could, if you didn't have the right ethics in the company, that could exist. But the fact is, it didn't at Tempo. And if you talk to anybody in the construction division, they would tell you Tex Energy was harder on Tempo's installations than they were on anybody else's. But we were very conscious of that perception. We actually made sure they were in different sections of the company. We delineated the areas with different colored partitions. We created what is commonly referred to as a Chinese wall.
Okay.
So other than education, there wasn't a lot of conversation went through there. But the fact is, there was a lot of education through there. And our construction people and our service people became very knowledgeable in energy savings and energy efficiency. Right. Much more so than I think any other company in the DFW area.
And you had to be.
Yeah, you had to be. But they could walk into somebody's house and they could spot non-air conditioning things that were affecting the performance of their unit. Yep. One of my favorite, and I only know it anecdotally, but it is absolutely true. If you read our reviews, our people sold air conditioning based on efficiency. That was a big thing. But the reviews we got back were all related to comfort. Right. The people say, I didn't realize air conditioning could make it this comfort. I thought we had to have different fluctuations from room to room. Right. They thought you really couldn't have good humidity control. And the fact is, if you put in good equipment and you seal up the environment that goes into the home and make it tight, you can then control what the indoor conditions are like,
right,
and make it much more comfortable. And that was very rewarding to have them come back and say it's we spent a lot of money here, but what we got was comfort that we didn't think we could ever realize.
Yeah, the being able to provide a level of happiness that someone can't understand or measure. Once they do see it, it's like, wow.
Well, the home is most people's biggest investment.
100%.
And then you walk into that and people say, well, I've never been comfortable in this home. And
Yeah.
here's your biggest investment.
Right.
You want them to be comfortable, and they're really happy when they can be.
Yeah, so the 2001 to 6 was this huge growth in energy movement to new construction, and having a house meet the Energy Star guidelines or the ratings that were there were a whole new world. And when you were living in a house pre 2006, it didn't really have an understanding of what energy efficiency was. So now that we've seen that world, and now that we're seeing air conditioners now, and I think we have really for the last, let's say, 15 years, getting smaller.
Yeah.
You've got bigger houses and smaller air conditioners, and a lot of that is just how they're building homes, and how our designers and how the engineers are able to create these tight little fortresses, if you were, and really that's everything energy efficiency means. So very, very excited that we're a company that kind of led some of that, at least led it from our vantage point in work on how we grew this business.
Well, we did indeed, and the industry calls that right sizing.
Okay. Yeah.
And a lot of companies, as the builders began to tighten up this envelope that the home is built in, they didn't change their sizing practices. They kept the same size units, and that a lot of them just did it by square footage. They didn't really run an accurate load calculation to determine it. And Tempo never was that way. Tempo always had top-notch engineering. We hired good engineers. We trained good engineers. And so we were kind of a pioneer in the right sizing, certainly in the DFW area.
Well, love how we've done energy and getting more out of that home than before. What I would really like to last talk about, if we could, is some of the leadership growth within the company, and then maybe a little bit of the leadership transition, because you've been a part from day one and really getting to see a lot of that. So I'd like to know from your perspective, how you saw that evolve, and then when you and the other executive team started making that conscious effort to say, hey, we've got to grow this and keep this moving.
Well, of course, Steve's a little bit younger than I am, but yeah, we recognized pretty early on that this company was going to go on, and we needed to prepare for it. So we really started about 7 or 8 years before we even anticipated retirement. One of the things we started is we sent several of our top managers to the Vistage program, which puts them in an environment with other people that are running companies, that are key company members, and they can share ideas on a non-competitive basis. And it gives you something more than just, it gives you a resource more than just the people you have in your own company.
Right.
So, got smart people in the company, but there's a lot of smart people outside of the company that you can get good information from. And I think that has helped. I know you speak very highly of it. You went through that program, but we have several people that went through that program and are still in the program. So it's good. We also started what is now called the Horizon Forum, which is a larger group of people. There's probably 30 people in it, 25, 30 people in it now. And that's just a training program and an educational program for future leaders of the company.
Right.
And it came out, just saying basic things about leadership, about how companies could run. Because our leadership and our of the division wasn't all made up of business school graduates.
Right.
So they had to know how to run a business. They were good in their own field, but they also needed some business background.
Right.
And some of them didn't have a lot of that. So we attempted to give them that. We gave them some history as well.
Correct.
Certainly taught them a lot about the ESOP.
Yep.
And that was the model we were using, and that seems to be embraced. I don't see anybody wanting to go away from that model.
No. Well, a lot of what we get out of it now, and I know early years it was more, kind of unwrapping yourself from what you're doing day to day and learning more about the foundation of the company and what we do. And even today, we talk about health insurance. We'll talk about building a stronger culture. We'll talk about just different things. Although they're 100% related to everything we do today, it's not something that people see or do. It's not like we're teaching people how to be a technician or teaching people how to be a rater, or even teaching people how to move information from one side of the business to the other. It's teaching people how to help others and get educated on how to move our business forward.
Well, you mentioned health insurance, and that's really a good example of what ESOPs can do and what that kind of culture can do, because health insurance became very complex, became very expensive, and there were many companies that would only provide basic health insurance for the employee. If you wanted family coverage, that was all up to you. You had to pay for that. There were a lot of people that were actually paying people to go find their own insurance and not be on the company insurance, or saying if your spouse has insurance, you have to be on her insurance first before you can be on our insurance. And we took the exact opposite aspect of that. We said, listen, we want you to be on health insurance because if you have a medical catastrophe, that can ruin you financially for life.
100%.
I mean, it can ruin you socially too. I mean, it can break up a marriage. It can do a lot of things.
Right.
If you don't have, but you can jeopardize your family.
Sure.
And so we actually encourage people to take out our health insurance. We were very diligent in buying it. We're now partially self-funded on that. We've grown to that aspect.
Right.
But one of the things we did is we went to our group of people and said, listen, health insurance for a family is pretty expensive compared to what it is for the individual. But what we'd like to do, if it's all right with you as the shareholders of the company, we want to pay a fixed percentage of the coverage, regardless of whether that person does individual coverage or whether he's covering his whole family. So if you're going to pick up 75% of that, obviously you're going to substitute, you're going to subsidize that person that has family coverage to a greater degree than you're going to subsidize the person that has individual coverage. But I think it was unanimous. I don't think anybody disagreed with that concept, although they may not personally benefit from it.
Right.
And so that spoke volumes to me about what the culture was at the company, that the shareholders almost unanimously, if not unanimously, would vote to do that.
Yeah, and do it again. The health of our partners and the health of people is what matters the most. And whether that be in illness or just being happy, being able to have more money to spend on your family and not have to worry about health. 100% of the health insurance cost is huge. So David, I know that we've covered many things today, and I really appreciate everything that we did get to cover. The history of Tempo, as you said it, brought back so many memories for me as well. It's truly a company built by the people, for the people of the company. And I really appreciate you spending time today to share it with us.
Well, I'm glad to be here, and I hope sharing the history helps.
Yep.
The company doesn't need to be bound by the history, but they ought to be aware of it.
Right. Well, like they say, you always can take a look back, but I can assure you, we are full steam ahead forward, and we've learned a significant amount from how we've grown.
Yeah, this company has transitioned better than we could possibly imagine.
Well, man, David, I appreciate it.
Joey?
Yep. Thank you
Always
so
a
much.
pleasure.
Yep.